King, comfort of the spirit, true to Lord President, fill us all things, treasure, blessings, and giver of life. Come and abide us and cleanse us from every impurity, and save our souls, O good. So this should, yeah, I still have control here. I'll just go chronologically in the for the trip. This is in Serbia, someplace. This is in Belgrade. That's the new cathedral. But we didn't see that. Somebody that was on the internet, and I swiped it. We flew out on a Sunday night at 9 o'clock, and we arrived at midnight between Monday and Tuesday. So the all of Monday was completely gone, spent in the air, and it was 17 hours in the air and 4-hour layover in Doha on Qatar Airlines. And the airport in Doha is magnificent and huge. I didn't see much of the didn't see much at all actually of the city, other than the skyline and all of that. And that's I hear it in the middle of the desert there's this vast, immense, tall city that's just rising up out of the desert. Anyway, so we got to Tbilisi about midnight, and it took a while to get baggage. It didn't take any time to go through passport control or anything like that. And then we had to drive to a monastery. And it was a very difficult drive because most of it was on the far side of the city. So we had to go through the city, which was, a lot of narrow, very old roads. And then we went off into the hinterland and up a canyon. And it was a dirt track with big ruts in the road and water on the road, and all completely overgrown. No electricity, no lights, no nothing. At 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. And it was kind of they were kind of navigating by braille. Saw some, and memory. So we finally got there. By that time, I was sick. I was pretty sick. That came down really with the heavy fever and chills. Starting on the flight from Doha to Tbilisi, and then here we had this 2-hour horrific drive, and I hadn't intended to use this, but this gives you an idea of the accommodations at the monastery. In other words, it's a solid wooden bed with a little thin pad and a blanket.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was, and then there were other blankets, thank God, because basically I had a fever of about 104 by that time. But I was not happy that we hadn't gone just directly from the airplane to the hotel and recovered for 24 hours before. So I was not in a happy mood. And of course you couldn't see anything. Now we got in, 2:30, 2:45, and the fathers were all up. There was one who was waiting for us because they begin their services around 3 or 3:30. So they got us put into our rooms, no expectations, of course. we could see that these were big stone buildings, but we couldn't see any details because it was pitch dark and there was no electricity and no lights, other than the headlights um, um, from the vehicles. So that was, and they did have flashlights to get into the rooms and things like that. So that was helpful. Um,
What was the
but
name of
this
that?
is the monastery here. This is Monastery of St. Basil.
Okay.
And we'll go back to this later. If you look at the okay. If you look at the masonry, the details, and this kind of masonry work is right out of the Roman Empire.
Mm.
Mm. With layers of bricks and then layers of stone and layers of bricks and layers of stone. And I thought, wow, this thing has to be really ancient. Whoops. And turns out it was built 20 years ago.
Oh.
All new.
Mm.
But it's exactly like an ancient building from 1500 years ago. The monastery is very interesting. It was founded by Father Vasilios, Saint Basil. His name is Basil, who is a very well-known elder in the Georgian Church. Very kind man. He's probably in his 70s someplace. I think I have a picture of him later on, and he is he's quite a remarkable man. There are 22 men in the Brotherhood there, and they use Byzantine chant. It's entirely Athonite in its structure as a monastery. So the schedule is Athonite. They do the services throughout the night. They It's pretty rigorous so far as fasting goes, but it's really a very strong, serious monastery that the services are all in Georgian, but I knew the Byzantine chant and some of the texts well enough that I could identify the nouns. Yeah, I could identify the names. But it was very interesting. So on Tuesday, during the night, I was, had these chills and stuff. But then after about 10 o'clock in the morning, it all disappeared. And I felt kind of fatigued, but all right. So I went and sat on the bench here in the sun. And gradually the fathers came, and so spent some time with them, with the abbot. This is Father Nathaniel. Father Nathaniel spent years in the United States, and so his English is very good. And he was the guide for the pilgrims. Kirillo led the whole thing, and it was we had Steve Miroy and Glenn Mine, or George Mine, um, uh, and then we had a couple of Georgian drivers, because you couldn't put all the people and all the luggage in one SUV. It didn't work. Anyway, so this is the main altar. Georgian architecture is very traditional, but you can see this is really beautifully done. Nice stonework. Of course, the Georgian inscriptions on the icons. So an Athonite type chandelier. And there's no electricity at all in the church. Oops. So that's another shot. These were taken from the second floor. Actually, that entrance that we saw from that courtyard is onto the second floor of the church, where there's a kind of window looking out over the nave of the church, and there are two side chapels that are little tiny chapels. And that's the monastery from another angle. There's still another building off to the left here. And this is, I believe it's a combination between cells and the trapeza. So you can see it's way up in the mountains. You can't see any light from the city. Yeah, it's out there. And it's surrounded by orchards and stuff. So Tuesday was the eve of the leave taking of Pascha. So I couldn't make it to Vespers, but I did get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go to Matins. And that was just beautiful. You know, here again, very Athonite Byzantine chant, but in Georgian. So, okay. So the other guys, let's see. I'll go back here. The other guys went to the grave of Elder Vitali. Elder Vitali was a remarkable holy man who was tied in with Bishop Zenobius, who, and they were the wellspring of a lot of the monastic life among the Russian-speaking and among Georgian, but especially among the Russian-speaking people in Georgia during the Soviet period. Elder Vitali ordained dozens of people and tonsured multitudes of monks and nuns during the Soviet period. You can see Kirill there venerating his grave. I didn't have a chance to get there, but I did have a chance to get to his house. So after after trapeza on Wednesday morning, they took me down to the hospital, and I was out of commission until Friday. Then Friday, whereas the other guys, they did go around and play tourist in Tbilisi to some degree, and and go to various pilgrimage sites and things. So, but after getting out of the hospital on Friday, Kirilo left the other guys in the hands of his buddies, and he took me to meet Yekaterina. Eka is her nickname in Georgian, and she also spent many years in the United States, speaks perfect English, and she's a spiritual daughter of Bishop Gerasim in Dallas, who's, of course, one of my oldest friends. And so she prepared a beautiful lunch feast, and we spent most of the late afternoon together, which was a real joy in her apartment. But she kind of knows. What's this?
This is in Georgia.
Yeah. Are there any questions, by the way? Okay.
Hey, Metropolitan.
Uh-huh. Hey, how are you doing, Christian?
Well, thank you. I'm enjoying listening to this and seeing the pictures. You mentioned something about Byzantine chant earlier.
Right.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Byzantine chant, it's the old Greek chant from well, I mean, it's gone through many kind of versions over the course of the centuries, but it's the kind of chant that's used on the Holy Mountain, on Mount Athos,
Yeah.
and throughout the Eastern Mediterranean. Most of the churches, of course, the Greek church, the Serbian church, the Bulgarian church, the Syrian church, Jerusalem, Alexandria, all use Byzantine chant.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you, Metropolitan.
Yeah, I'll play some for you next time I see you.
Yes, thank you. I would love that.
Okay. Let's see. So it echoes, and then her sister came too. Oops.
Metropolitan Jonah.
Uh-huh.
Were you going there just for a pilgrimage, or was there something that you wanted to accomplish while you were there?
It was mainly for a pilgrimage.
And sorry about not answering earlier because my computer was messing up. So that's why I'm on
now my
phone.
computer is messing up. It's very strange. Because it was working fine for.
It came from Belarus.
Okay. All right. So, so Friday we were in Tbilisi, Friday night, and then we went to a hotel, and then we went to Kirill's old parish, where I celebrated liturgy, and the congregation was largely expatriates, Anglophone expatriates. So there were Americans, Canadians, Brits, Australians, New Zealanders, South African, all sorts of people from all over the English-speaking world.
Wow.
The parish is a Georgian parish, and it's newly built, and this is the altar. You can see, I mean, beautiful Byzantine style frescoes, and they said that the frescoes in this is just the apse. They said the frescoes in the apse actually cost more than the building itself. So, but magnificent church to serve liturgy, and it's all brand new.
Can we prop it up here?
I really like this altar table.
Radhika, Lake is asking, does the Georgian church does it exclusively use Byzantine chant or just that monastery?
There's about 8 or 10 places in Georgia that use Byzantine chant.
Okay.
And most of them use Georgian?
Yes, they use Georgian chant.
Oh,
which is its own ancient tradition.
Sacred Monastery of St. Nina in Unionbridge, Maryland. And I remember they do really pretty Byzantine chant, but I asked them, do you also do Georgian chant? And I think they sometimes do.
Yeah, I think they probably do some, but I don't think there are too many Georgian speakers there. Because the base of St. Nina's is Greek. Anyway, this is a picture of the trapeza. You can see that the building is still under construction, but we had quite a feast after liturgy, and it was a regular supra with a with a tamada, making the ritual toasts, and like most Georgian feasts, the food is just piled high. And so it used to be that you could only make a toast with cha-cha, which is grappa, knock your socks off kind of grappa. But then the patriarch said, okay, you can make a toast with wine. It's acceptable. But only full alcohol or wine, no beer. But these guys are from all over the English-speaking world. Now, there were 3 tables. There's a table to the right, which is this, and I think these guys are mostly Georgians. But then there was a table to the left as well, and which is where the women sat. And the division between the sexes is quite strict there. In fact, it's a very healthy thing, because the men know what men are and women know what women are, and they're very happy in those roles, and they support each other in those roles.
So at restaurants, are they separate or are they different?
From what I could see, the women would sit at one end of the table and the men at the other. In restaurants. So after liturgy and trapeza, I was interviewed by a journalist who flew down from Russia with a film crew to interview me, so we did that in the church here. Some more pictures of the church. This is the outside of the church. You can see the ancient style architecture. And
it's really beautiful.
Yeah, it really is. But they do a great job. I wonder how we could possibly use this kind of architecture ourselves. So serving liturgy. This guy is one of the expatriates. His name is Randall Mark Trainer. He used to be a novice with me back in Point Reyes. And he's also a close friend of Father Aidan. He's like the ultimate godfather for the Austin area of so many young men who came into Orthodoxy, came in under his direction. So okay. Can you hear this?
We're not hearing the sound, Lodica. Oh, now we are. A little bit.
A little bit.
You may have to restart the video again. I couldn't hear anything. I just hear people move as you move.
Let's do that.
No, we're not hearing the sound of the Dika, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, what this is now we've jumped to Sunday. And Sunday morning in the Church of the Transfiguration in the Vake district of central Tbilisi. You can tell this church is undergoing renovation as well. You can see how, the rough walls and things like that. And then a very temporary iconostas. But it's an incredible dynamic parish. The priest, who you'll see in a minute, is Father Shalva, who is he's the real kind of motivation within this community. One of the things that spurred the growth of the church is that they have a food for the poor program where they feed about 500 people every weekend.
Oh my word.
Yeah. It started out with 10 or 15 and grew from there.
Wow.
The Georgian church is very socially minded. And the other thing that's really, I think, very valuable to understand is that during the Soviet era, the Georgian church was almost destroyed. People were, there were only a few churches open. Atheism was the reigning religion of the land. And since the fall of Soviet power, the church has taken a leading element, has become a leading element in the life of the community, in the life of the Georgian community, and has taken its place as the probably as the most important part of the culture. So there's been a mass return to the church, and even just simple people walking down the street, they'll stop and make the sign of the cross and bow before the churches, and it's really an amazing thing. They sat us in a place of honor inside the altar. Altar's just right over to the right. And they presented me with this epitrachelion, which has the image of Saint Gabriel or Gabadze on it, and which is a magnificent gift. And Saint Gabriel would play a very large role in the rest of the tour. He was essentially a fool for Christ in the Tbilisi area, and he was best known though for at a May Day parade, where they would have all the military marching through the main square and these huge banners of Marx and Lenin and all these people and Stalin flying from the buildings. Well, he torched the banner of Lenin, which was 4 stories high, and then he got into the windows beneath the burning banner and started preaching to the crowd in the square. He suffered for that, but he was without fear, and eventually he became a great elder, healing people and being able to reveal to them their sins and their illnesses, and he's a wonderful saint. This is Father Shalva. You can't really see, but there's about 500 or 600 people in the church. There are 5 or 6 priests.
Wow.
What's that? So you'll see that eventually. There were 5 or 6 priests, and then there were about 25 altar servers. The music was very beautiful. And Father Salva serves in a very, very deeply spiritual manner. And this deacon here is now Father Gabriel, and he speaks very good English, and he was very helpful to us. They had me do various things during the liturgy. So I don't know if you recognize these vestments, but I have a set just like this. So there they are taking out communion.
Where did the choir sing?
It's over on the side. Now look at, this is really interesting. Look at the chalice set.
Ooh.
Very beautiful.
Yes.
This is interesting. You know, the discos, the elevated discos, but look at the stem. And of course, this is a huge chalice. This probably contains a whole liter of wine.
Wow.
Poor deacon who would have to consume it, you know. But usually there's several deacons. They have their own. They make some of their own vestment cloth, and it's quite beautiful.
So Vladika?
Yeah.
So you know, have you ever met Father Seraphim?
Which Father Seraphim?
Isn't it the one who does that like Aramaic stuff?
No, I didn't meet him.
So the kind of music he does, is that kind of different than the main Georgian?
Yeah, that's Aramaic. That's something completely different. That's a very ancient tradition. So I don't know how this got in here, but this was you can see me speaking with Father Shalva there on the side. But they have a TV in the hall so that people can see the liturgy.
Is this at the monastery, Vladika?
No, this is a parish in Tbilisi.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, right in the middle of downtown. It being thoroughly restored.
Would you say that all the monasteries have large groups of people that gather there to receive the mysteries and
Many of the
direct
parishes,
spiritual direction? And
the parishes do. So far as the monasteries go, not all of them do. Some do. Some are great centers. Some don't want. For example, St. Basil's Monastery, where we went to first, forbids women from setting foot on the premises, just like Mount Athos. So they don't want crowds. They want hesychia. Other places vary. So this was after liturgy. Then after we went, they had a beautiful trapeza for us. They don't have a coffee hour. The poor who need to be fed are fed. They have other buildings that deal with that. But then the clergy and the main people who keep things going have a trapeza that they go to, which was and so they were celebrating our visit and were very kind. But there was also one lady who had turned 100 that day, and she was there with all her friends, and so they had this typical Georgian supra feast, and then they had her. Then she went over and she started playing the piano, the birthday girl, and so she and all her lady friends sang all these old, familiar Georgian songs. And so it was really, really an honor to be there for that. Now, after that, Sunday afternoon, we went up to Mtsketa. Mtsketa is the ancient capital of Georgia, and it's about 15 miles outside of Tbilisi, up a river valley. And there are two huge ancient churches. This is Santavro Monastery, and it's in this monastery that St. Gabriel's relics are housed. And then about half a mile from it is the huge Svetitska Veli, which is the ancient cathedral. It's 1,100 years old, and it sits on top of the foundations of other churches going back another 700 years more. In Svetitska Veli is where they have the robe of the Lord. But when the Jewish merchant brought it from Jerusalem after the crucifixion, there was a woman there, one of the aristocracy, I assume, who took it and grasped it to her and died on the spot. And they couldn't wrench it out of her arms. So she was buried with it, and they erected a pillar on that site. But that's the other cathedral. I served there with Patriarch Ilya 14 years ago. This is where they have the relics of St. Gabriel, and they also have a little chapel, which will come momentarily, at the bush that St. Nina used to hide from the pagans. So she climbed into this very dense bush, and the bush is still there, 1,700 years later. So this is the Santavro Monastery. Very classic Georgian architecture. You can see the three apses, 1, 2, and 3. Which is the norm in most Georgian churches. And this is the little chapel, and the bush is over on this side. And there's a nun who is, this is the bush. There's a nun who was sitting there selling candles and holy water and all that kind of stuff. There's a whole series of pictures here that are just repeats, but this is the monastery of Javari. And in the center of this building is a place where there had been an idol's statue, which was taken down in the 4th century and a cross erected, a very tall cross covered with icons of the major feast days. And but you can see this for miles in every direction. But look at the cars. I mean, you wouldn't think that this was the middle of the Middle East. Anyway.
Yes.
Anyway, very interesting place. Oops, it's going backwards. So you got Father John and I, and Father Shalva. And so Father John, George, and Steve basically were with the one driver, and Kirill drove me around. Of course, he stayed back basically to attend to me when I was in the hospital. So it kind of we weren't together as much as I had thought or had hoped. Now this is the back of the Transfiguration Church, the back of the altar. So you can see they've got a lot of work to do, but it doesn't prevent them from using the church.
Is that church still being restored?
Yes. Oh yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They don't bother with occupancy permits and things like that. Now, so that was Sunday. We also on the weekend had dinner twice with a really remarkable man whose name is Guram, and who was he's the leader of the anti-LGBT movement, and the pro-life movement. He is a real estate developer, and so he has funds that he can spend, and was really fascinating. There's a real struggle going on there now, because the Americans are trying very hard to inflict all of this kind of woke nonsense on the Georgians, and they don't want any part of it. So, for example, one of the things the patriarch did is that he instituted the National Day of the Family, and it basically shut down the entire country, as all the families, and Georgians have families very important to the Georgians, multiple generational families. Everybody went out and had a picnic and celebrated family being together, which certainly is politically incorrect in our culture, but is I think is profoundly salutary for the Georgians. And he's also tied in with the international what do you call it? Conference on the Family, and other kinds of international pro-life and pro-family work. But I think it's a very important thing that we're aware what our government is doing over there to try and destroy Orthodox culture, because that's exactly what the intention is. So that was Sunday. On Monday, we drove to the city of Kutaisi, which is about 4 hours to the west of Tbilisi. And for a lot of the road is a very nice modern, new freeway. But then there's the road. Then it branches off, and the road to Kutaisi is a little 2-lane road going down a river valley. And just off of that road is this church. The church is about 9th century. It's in a place called Ubisa, Ubisa, and it has a the thing that is most remarkable about it is that it has frescoes from the 14th century, which are in beautiful condition. The church itself is about 9th century, and the complex was built over the course of several centuries. So this is the main entrance, the courtyard. The tower is a later addition. It was a place of refuge for I guess the clergy and whoever was in the church away from the raids of the Muslims and the Persians. And this is the church. Very typical ancient Georgian style iconostas, beautiful carved crucifix. But the real, the real treasure is the frescoes. Unfortunately, there was this chandelier just distorts all sorts of things. On the other hand, it was the only source of light in the church. So, so I mean, this is straight
Beautiful.
Paleologan Renaissance.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's some of the best preserved that I've ever seen. Very beautiful. Now, one of the images, and you'll see that I've got a closer, as much of a close-up as I could get, is of this cherub, which is quite fascinating, with the eagle, the lion, the ox, and the man. Unfortunately, there's a kind of mold that grows on the walls and they only clean it off every so often. It doesn't hurt the paint. The paint is the paint penetrates into the plaster, but the mold kind of obscures some of the lower frescoes. There's Kirill, and this is Shal. Not Shalva, this is Andre, who was the other driver. Now this is the altar, and you can see in the ancient design they had these steps with seats going around. I stuck the camera into the altar. The priest came and we had a chance to meet him and talk with him. But this is, whoops. But These are, you can still get the line. You can still see the lines, even here.
Mm.
But so many of these frescoes are, and these are just in, like the Annunciation is in beautiful condition.
Oh, yeah.
Or the angels, the Ancient of Days.
Mm.
And God only knows how old this beam is. It's probably 1,400 years old or 1,200 years old.
So, Vladika,
Uh-huh.
during Soviet times, how many of the churches were destroyed?
About 90% of them were closed, and I don't know how many were destroyed. Many were destroyed.
So there's only a fraction of the historic ones that are still there.
Yep. That's communism. They hate what is good and beautiful.
Yep.
Well, that didn't last very long. So, let's see. You can see the Last Supper here.
Mm.
Christ enthroned with the Mother of God and the angels and the cherubim. And I think there's another cherub on the other side, but I couldn't see. And there's that, finally I got a clear picture of that image.
Mm.
So you can, with this one, you can just see the tower in the back. So going down this road, this is the road, actually. The parking areas are nice and developed, but the road is just as it is. It's paved, but that's, so it's about 40 miles, 50 miles on that road. And it goes through all sorts of villages. And the villages have, they put their wares out on the road, and each village has a particular industry. So a couple of the villages do hammocks, and they're these beautiful fabrics of hammocks, and it's that you put between two trees or something. Then they have pottery, and then another place does bread. Various and sundry things along the road. And then, of course, you can get your usual soft drinks and all of that kind of stuff. But we got into Kutaisi, and we met the priest, Father Lazar. And so that was Monday night, and he took us out for dinner. Now, one of the things that's quite interesting about Georgian restaurants is that many of them have lots of small cottages like this as dining rooms for 6 or 8 or 10 people. So we got into, we had the chance to, we were, and this, so the restaurant, it has its usual restaurant kind of thing, with windows on the street and tables inside. But then you go around to the courtyard of the building, and it had probably 5 of these little cottages, or whatever you want to call it, which were individual dining rooms.
Mm.
This was one of them, and you can see where the wine vats are here. He's got the lid off of wine. And one of the things about Georgian wine is it's aged in huge um, uh, pottery vats that are sunk into the ground. Now this thing here is what they used to stomp the grapes in. So it obviously didn't have a piece of glass on top, but they would put the grapes in here, and then you could stand in this and stomp the grapes with your feet. And there was a spigot here. You can see where the spigot went, where the juice would run out into a vat. So this was quite interesting, seeing some of the real old-fashioned Georgian winemaking. And wine is a huge, huge thing in Georgian culture. So that was Monday. Tuesday, we drove to St. Maximus the Confessor Monastery. And this was deep in the Caucasus. And this, I mean, you can see, you can't quite see actually how oh, come on. You can't quite see how big these mountains are. But the canyon is about, you got mountains going up in a V about 3,000 feet. And these mountains here at the end that you can see with snow probably are more like 20,000 feet tall. Yeah, huge. Of course, you can see that everything is green within an inch of its life. And along here, there's a raging torrent. It's not just a river, it's a raging torrent. Coming down from the high country. And on the other side of these mountains is Russia. It's the Russian border. So we got to the monastery of St. Maximus after a beautiful drive. And it also is undergoing reconstruction. It was only recently that they excavated his relics and brought them up into the church. But this is the monastery where he died in the year 662. And his relics were underneath underneath the altar.
Was he in exile there, Vladika, or?
Yes. Yeah,
okay.
he was sent into exile. They cut off his hand and cut out his tongue to try and silence him, and sent him deep into the Caucasus into exile, where he died. So this is Father Hilarion, and he's alone there at this monastery. This is the old chapel, or the dimension, and they're building a new church all around it. Now, there's pictures of that. But that's a very small, it used to be a whole church. And you can see here, this shiny thing is glass. And and there's also a piece of glass here under the altar. You can see where St. Maximus's relics were. But this is the courtyard of the monastery. This is the church that's under construction. There's only the one priest monk there, nobody else. But there's probably room for about 10 people, 15 people. They have this, they have this huge baptistry that they fill up with water when they do a baptism. And that's the church. that's as it's being rebuilt. So they have a long way to go, a lot of money to raise. And just some of the mountains around it. Very steep, very, very tall. And this is just typical Georgian countryside. So that now we've jumped ahead to Wednesday afternoon. I think, okay. This is a little house in the backyard. This is back in Tbilisi that St. Gabriel built. This is just the backyard of the house that he grew up in. And he built this kind of chapel, essentially, and he housed all sorts of ancient icons and not so ancient icons and things that were being discarded by the Soviets from the churches. So he rescued a lot of that stuff, and he and he would stay here. He would when he was in Tbilisi. He spent a lot of time at the Samtavro monastery. He also spent a lot of time in jail because the Soviets didn't exactly approve of his of some of his activities. I didn't take any pictures inside. There are doves being raised up here. This is just to the side of the chapel. It's a little tiny door, just about a foot wide. He was definitely a fool for Christ. He has his bed in there, which is a hole. It's about 3 feet wide and 6 feet long and 4 feet deep into the ground. It's where he used to sleep. And so he would go in there and he would pray and spend time. His niece and nephew live in the house now, so it's still within the family. Now this is inside the Church of St. Barbara, which is nearby. St. Gabriel helped to build this church, and was remembered for lifting a 100-kilo rock that needed to be moved. 100 kilos, 220 pounds. So it's very Western style, but it's a beautiful church. This is one of the churches that uses a lot of Church Slavonic in Tbilisi. There's only 3 or 4 churches that use Slavonic. This is the bishop's throne, which is in the center of the church. You know how when there's a hierarchical liturgy in our usage, we bring out a platform and we put a chair on it, but it's very temporary. In Georgia, they leave these. They leave the bishop's throne in the center of the church, especially in cathedrals. So I have to say, I really like this. Beautifully carved, probably weighs a ton. Some of them are made out of stone. But I talked to a couple of the ladies there, and they were very kind, explained all sorts of things about the church to us. And that's it from the looking at the iconostas. Now this is back to Transfiguration in Vaque. This guy is an old friend from California. He and his wife moved to Tbilisi. His wife is Georgian, and so they've raised their family there. And but he heard I was coming, and I got a hold of him, so we connected. I was very pleased. Dylan Crawford. I don't remember where this is. I think this is a set of pictures that Kirill sent after we left, because he's there with the bishop. And Eka. So, and I think this is Pentecost. So,
who was the bishop? Was it the guy in yellow?
What's that?
Who was the bishop? Was the guy in the yellow robe?
I think this is the bishop, and this is probably the priest. So anyway, after let's see, after back to Kutaisi, on Wednesday morning, there was another liturgy for the English-speaking expatriates, and so that was very nice in Father Lazar's church. And Tuesday night, he and one of his old friends took me out to dinner, which was very nice. Beautiful Georgian restaurant of a still higher caliber than we went to before. And so Wednesday was the liturgy, and then they had a banquet for us. They rented a banquet hall and had this beautiful supra for us. And they had a Georgian choir come and sing traditional Georgian music. And it was a chance for the expats to all come together and talk to one another in English. And there were probably 30 some people there. Very beautiful. Of course, the wine flowed, the food flowed. Georgians know how to party. This is Father Vasily, the founder of the monastery in that we went to first, St. Basil's. He's also the abbot he's also the spiritual father for a women's monastery as well. Very kind man, a very, very holy man. So, oops. This is a graduation, actually, from a military school. One of the drivers went to. So, so after all of that, on Thursday, we were back in Tbilisi and used the morning to get packed up, and then we went shopping. First place we went to was a vestment makers. They've already made some vestments for me, and so I ordered another set of vestments and a bunch of cassocks. But it's very good to have a relationship with them. And then we went to the church goods store and got a whole bunch of tchotchke. There wasn't actually much of interest. There was very little of interest. It was, you know, they had some little icons and little crosses and things, but they weren't really, it wasn't anything to write home about, or much to bring home, quite frankly. So I was kind of disappointed about that. I was hoping to find some stuff for the church, or for the monastery, but to no avail. I think you need to know the special merchants for that. So after we went shopping, we ended up going to another supra, which was held in the apartment of one of Kirill's close friends, who invited another 8 or 10 people. And so we were there, this young man, Colin, and his wife and little ones. And his wife's parents showed up and eventually took the kids, but they were running around like mad. And, you know, and then in the center of the living room, you had this big table set up, where the men all sat, you know, doing this, you know, in this kind of formal feast. But you know, it's formal, but yet it's informal. It's, you know, it's warm and family style, not kind of, it's not institutional formal. And so that that lasted until about 11:30, and then we went to the airport and got back on the plane.
Oh, wow.
17 hours to come back here. So,
Wow.
so that's the trip.
Wow.
There's Steve took about a couple thousand photographs. You've just seen all the photographs that I took, plus a few others that other people took. So there's more to come. Anybody have any questions?
Mm.
No questions?
There are a couple of questions in the chat for Dika. Alex was asking about the film crew from Russia in the interview and what they were interested in. And David is asking about the practice of depicting the Ancient of Days. When did that fall away, or not?
Well, it's actually still done. You just have to have a church that has a large enough, you know, that's large enough to do the complex of like that. So it's put this over here. So, but it's important to understand that the Ancient of Days is not the Father. The Ancient of Days is Christ. And if you look on the, let's see. If you look closely on the fresco, whoops, not this one. You can see that there's the cross inscribed in the halo. So this is you know the image of Christ, the eternal Christ. So let's see what else. Anatoly, your question, the Russian flag, yeah, that was from the embassy yesterday, the Russia Day celebration that I got invited to. And basically what they came down to ask me about from Russia, and it was Dmitry Toropov from the channel Russia, was what I thought about this imposition of woke values all over the world, and as a criterion of aid from America. And basically I was very forthcoming, and I'm sure it could get me into all sorts of trouble. And it may yet, who knows? But basically, I told him that this is something very evil, and that we need to stand up against this, and we need to be aware of what our government is doing, and we need regime change.
Right.
Basically, because what we're doing is we're making enemies out of the entire world.
Yeah.
That wants to maintain their culture and their cultural values.
Was the interview published in Russia?
Oh, it's a TV interview.
It was live?
No, it was not live. I'm not sure when they're going to air it.
Okay.
But he'll tell me. I think we're cut off from Russian media over here. So I don't think we'll have a chance to, I may have a chance to see it. But we talked for about an hour and a half. And he was very pleased with that. So, but 5 people coming down from Moscow, that was, that's an investment. So I wanted to give them their money's worth.
Good. Very good.
So not that Russians have any problem with going down to Georgia for the weekend. That's a big. So, but it's we talked a little bit about the war, talked a little bit about the ecclesiastical situation. We talked about a whole lot of different things. But it was quite interesting. So, all right. So, with that, it's gotten dark. So does anyone have any questions or anything else?
No, Vladika, that was a real treat. Thank you for sharing those beautiful pictures with us.
Oh, you're very welcome. I have to share some of the music too, but I don't know how to do that on this. So. All right. Well, so next week we'll start on the Epistle of St. Paul to Titus, and go back to our overview of the writings of St. Paul.
Very good.
God bless you.
Thank you.